Diary. Zach Dennis here again with Andrew Swafford and Lydia Creech.
Hi.
We
Hi.
had another very busy day here at TIFF. Kind of our last, probably our last busy day, at least for three of us being here.
Mm-hmm. Lydia and I are out this afternoon.
Yeah, probably not going to be the last TIFF Diary. I don't really want to sit here and talk by myself. I'm not one to just sit here and kind of pontificate about stuff and just like Will Oldham about some stuff. So
If we have time, we could do a Skype diary tomorrow afternoon or something.
yeah, you guys can like interview me on what because
But
or
we're
at least
also seeing movies today.
yeah. Well, I would say actually like later in the week because for instance on Monday I have Beale Street, Climax,
Mm-hmm.
First Man,
Yeah.
Old Man and a Gun.
That's like a lot of.
Yeah, so that might be worth. But let's go ahead and jump into let's jump into our slate. So I'll kick us off since I had the earliest screening. After we did our diary yesterday, I ran out and saw A Star Is Born, which is the as it's been billed from Venice, the arrival of the new auteur, Bradley Cooper.
The new auteur.
I saw there was just one review that I was like, Bradley Cooper, the next auteur, and I was like, we are in a world of hyperbole. This was one I think I talked about on the newsreel. We immediately billed this as like this is going to be the Oscar in capital letters movie for the year, and it is.
Yeah.
I feel like this thing will be a giant hit, but I was very skeptical going in. I was just like, I was kind of rolling my eyes, but I was like, I'm going to go to this because it is going to be this big movie. So
You're a man of the people. So.
yeah, I'm going to jump on it early and talk about it. Surprisingly, I liked A Star Is Born quite a lot.
I'm shocked.
Specifically, I really like the first. So it's kind of broken into like three halves. You have like the first.
There are three halves.
The three halves.
Precisely.
Exactly, three halves. Three parts.
3 acts.
Yeah, you got them kind of their courtship and him kind of getting her into like the music industry. Then you have her kind of rise in the music industry as he kind of starts to fade, and then you just kind of had the ending, which I'll leave ambiguous because that's not, that's just that.
That'll be considered.
And the first act of it is I don't know, it's really really good. It's just it's very charming. It's very appealing. It's just Lady Gaga is just fantastic. She has this instant charisma. I was telling Andrew yesterday that the first time you meet her, she's like in a bathroom stall having like an argument over the phone with this guy who's like trying to like marry her or something. She's like, "What are you talking about?" And then she like exits the stall and she's like standing there in the middle of the bathroom and she's like, "Fucking men!" And that's how we meet Lady Gaga's character. I think that she's compared to, this is a movie that's being kind of compared to La La Land, and she feels in terms of being like a female protagonist and a similar movie to that, she feels very different. She kind of does bring her own quality to it. Bradley Cooper is fine. He's solid.
He's
But
Bradley Cooper.
yeah, but what's really appealing about the first part of it, that like if it had ended right after that, I would have given it like 4.5 stars, but like I'm good with this. Is that it really ruminates in this courtship, mainly because it's interacting with like Bradley Cooper's character, Lady Gaga's character, and the spaces that they're in. They're not really inhabiting these like industry-esque spaces. It's not like there's a scene where like he sends her on a jet to go to his gig that's in another city, but overall it doesn't feel as flashy until it gets into the second part. And there's something about just the kind of dive bar scene, the strange kind of working class persona that Bradley Cooper's celebrity musician has. I kind of describe him as he's kind of like a mix between like Bruce Springsteen and some of the kind of Chris Cornell-esque rock stars who came out like in the mid 90s.
How did you feel about his accent while watching the movie?
It's kind of
the trailer makes it kind of laughable.
It is. I mean, it's kind of like that the entire time, but you just get used to it after a while. But it just this relationship between them and the spaces that they inhabit. There's something I think I compared it to Tournier early in my tweet, just because it kind of reminds you of like those kind of lazy westerns. Those it's just kind of them in this space, and there's not really much, even though there is anticipation to get to further action. They're just kind of lazily going by and enjoying each other's company, and there's something very charming about that. And then of course we have to get into all the other stuff. And it lost me a little bit, but still, I think it's actually a really strong movie. There's going to be this quick dissent, I feel like, with people who are like, oh, well, this is what, the fifth Star is Born remake.
Yeah.
It's not like reinventing the wheel. It's very it's still hitting the plot beats of that one. But I think that one, that's a kind of lazy complaint. Of it's the fifth remake. Of course, it's going to hit the same beats as the other ones. If you're complaining about it, like compare the Judy Garland one was a remake. It was doing the same thing. It's like that's kind of been its thing.
Also, you better start complaining about Halloween too.
Exactly, but it's just kind of I think it's one of those things where I think that this one does offer a lot to say about like 2018 celebrity, especially the kind of mental health and addiction, narratives of somebody like a Chris Cornell, or even on a broader sense, somebody like celebrities like Kate Moss and Anthony Bourdain, who have recently committed suicide and been dealing with mental health and drug and alcohol addictions and stuff like that. So I think
to refer back to one of our diaries the other day, you would not say this is like an acknowledging 2018 movie, but it's like actually
no, I think it's
an interesting way.
I think it's exploring this aspect of celebrity in a really interesting way, and I don't think Bradley Cooper, like I said, is like the giveaway number one star in this. It's Lady Gaga is really a standout. Sam Elliott has this really strong performance as Bradley Cooper's character's brother. But yeah, no, I think it does have this kind of interesting thing to say about celebrity and just the I don't know, the nature of it in an age that's inundated with like social media and technology. I think that's where it separates itself from the Barbra Streisand Star is Born and Judy Garland stars. Like those, they had that level of fame, but they didn't understand it on the level of like having Twitter involved.
So did the third act just get too plotty or too conventional, or what?
I think it runs too long. It's like a little over 2 hours. I think it needed to be either at a tight 2 hours or something.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think the second and third act they just kind of they just meander a little too long, and it loses the magic that it had in that first act. But Star is Born, it's going to be out at some point pretty soon. I think that one, it'll be a big hit and it'll be a player at the award season, but whatever. I think it's very entertaining, and Star is Born. Well, good stuff.
What did you see in the morning yesterday, Lydia?
The first movie I had yesterday morning was the one I was most excited about for the festival. It's the new Friedrich Wiseman documentary called Monrovia, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason I was so excited was I'm pretty sure he filmed some of it while I was still in school at Bloomington. Monrovia is just like right north of it. And when he introduced it, Friedrich Wiseman was pretty adamant about it. It's like, I just want to make a film about a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of how the documentary is structured is like you have all these shots of like Indiana countryside and cornfields and like people doing farm work and like their really cool farm equipment. Like modern farm equipment's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Just the way they have a machine for everything.
Yeah, and like how like computers and everything are involved with it. Like you don't think of computers being involved with it.
But it is like a lot.
Yeah.
They're really expensive. And then also like he kind of shows you Monrovia's Main Street, I guess. It's not very big. You can kind of see all of the buildings together. And like he'll show you a building and then we'll go inside of it. So you have like teens working at the pizza parlor or like the tattoo shop or the local cafe where the old dudes just hang out all day, it seems like.
That you have that in every town. You gotta have the old dudes hanging out in the cafe.
And I guess if you wanted some point of drama, he also puts in like various town council committee meetings and kind of comes back to those throughout the runtime. But it's really I mean, if you've seen a Wiseman doc, there is some sort of, like through theme or motif, but narratively, it's just like the way he works. He shoots a ton of footage and then finds the form or whatever in the edit.
Right.
He said they shot like 150 hours of footage or something over 10 weeks.
Man. And it's a shorter movie for him.
And it's a shorter movie for him. It's like 2.5 hours. I mean, I liked it. I like what Wiseman does. I think he's very funny. He's just like knows where to point his camera and when people are gonna do something funny, maybe, or because it's not like he juxtaposes things to. Sometimes he does in the editing, but in a way that's like just natural. Like, this is how it happened. My example was one of the ongoing like town council meetings. Is they keep talking about this new housing development, and like one lady's very adamantly opposed to it. She doesn't want 150 houses built. She's like, that's too many people. Our schools are too small. And then later in another one, you have a different like citizen, I guess, complaining about fire hydrants, and he just drops in a line about the housing development, and Wiseman cuts, and how hopefully that's way off in the future, and Wiseman just cuts to this like town council lady, and she smirks, and so it's like not, again, it's not like a cruel sort of humor. It's just like picking back up on these through lines, and like the fact that he even captured it at all is pretty cool. The audience that I was with asked in the Q&A afterwards were really shocked. I mean, I was shocked too, that it's a political movie. Like, Wiseman docs are sort of known for being apolitical, or he does the objective camera.
Yep.
But he was also like quick to point out in the Q&A, he's like, no, it's not objective. I just tried to be fair, and fair is subjective.
But people have maybe mismarketed it as his Trump movie.
Yes, because, I mean, just demographically speaking and statistically speaking, the people of Monrovia and Indiana almost overwhelmingly voted for Trump. Like, there's no way they didn't. But nobody talks about it, and none of the people in the film, like, go off about politics or liberals or just the things.
You don't have an Alex Jones character who's just sitting there, like, screaming. And
it's not like, they don't seem like they listen to Alex Jones. They just kind of go about their business. And, like, the old guys in the cafe talk about all the people they know that have died. It's just, like, kind of, that's what old people talk about. They just go down the list of, hey, you remember so-and-so, and he's my brother. And he owned the car shop, blah, 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 blah. And so, thankfully, it's not Wiseman's Trump doc, because we really don't need more opinion pieces or exposés, like, about the friendly Trump voter next door. That's...
Yeah. I mean, also I was going to say, like, how does it compare to the New York Times' moronic crusade to humanize the people who voted for him?
It doesn't seem like it sets out to do that, because also with Wiseman, he's like, Wiseman explores institutions. I mean, he got famous with his first film doing the Follies, right? And, like, that's an abusive prison system. And then high school, maybe abusive. Also. And so at first you're like, a town seems like a weird thing, like Monrovia, Indiana, that's a place that's not.
Yeah.
But if you think of it in this broader sense of, like, a small town in the Midwest, and, like, how it works and just how the people function,
and you're seeing little institutions inside the town,
yes,
like the gun show, for example, and the town hall meetings.
And so he's just kind of documenting those. And also, I very personally just liked the idea of, like, going into an evangelical church meeting in Indiana and, like, just recording the preacher talking, like, this is how they talk to the congregation. Even if it's not political, it's like, it's a very certain style and specific, and I don't know who else is documenting this.
Right.
So I liked it. I know some people have had reservations about it, but, and this is.
I mean, Darren's listening. You can just say Darren.
Some tweet Darren.
And I think this is what Wiseman was, just, like, watch it and then make up your mind. He's a really funny dude.
All right. Andrew?
I wish I would have seen that. But I like the things that I saw as well. I went to a program of 2 long-ish shorts. One was called Those Who Desire. It was 24 minutes, and the other was The Grand Bazaar, and it was 61 minutes. So I guess it's a feature. But I'll run through both these quickly. Those Who Desire is by Elena Lopez Riera. It's a Spanish film, and it has a pretty unusual premise. This is a nonfiction, slow cinema movie about competitive pigeon breeding. So it took me a good 5+ minutes to kind of figure out what exactly was going on, because it is done in that slow cinema style and everything is very oblique. But once I figured out what was going on, it's all of these dudes in this small Spanish town have been raising pigeons for the pigeon breeding competition.
I want to know that
really
realization
wanna see
moment where he was sitting there and he was just like,
Pigeon
pigeon
breeding
breeding
competition.
Obviously.
duh.
And they like paint their pigeons. Like there's a scene of a guy like holding a pigeon by its wing, and he has a paintbrush and he's like putting designs on the pigeon's feather. Because when the competition is happening, you got to be able to identify your pigeon, right? So essentially, and you laugh, but it gets pretty dark pretty fast.
Oh, okay.
Because all these dudes bring their pigeons to the pigeon breeding competition, and essentially what it is that there's one female pigeon, and there's a bunch of male pigeons, and the competition is whose male pigeon can impregnate the female pigeon the fastest, right? So it is kind of fucked up, and my initial reaction to figuring out what the conceit of the movie was that kind of like nervous laughter, like what exactly are we looking at here? And there's even some voiceover narration that kind of plays up the humor as well. Like there's a part where the narrator's kind of listing out all the names of the pigeons, because the breeders get to name them as well, and they have kind of
Like
funny
horses?
names. Yeah, kind of like
race
horses.
horses?
I wrote down some names.
Okay.
Ford Fiesta, Cum Laude, CSI, Clockwork Orange, Fatty, and Whimpers. These were some of the names. Of
The one who named it Clockwork Orange is a probably sick person.
Yeah,
oh
that's
my
maybe
God.
a little too appropriate. I did not think about that till just now, Zach. Thank you. But once the movie kind of gets settled in, and we're just kind of following this competition, she takes it with grave seriousness, and in the Q&A she was very serious as well, because on the one hand, what she is documenting is like a very insidious form of patriarchy, right? Of like, we're talking about animals here, but this is also like a sport of animal rape, right? And it's also all dudes who are doing the competition too. So there's like some sort of reflective judgment on them and their own personal lives, though we never get a whole lot of that. But then also, on the other hand, she's from not maybe this specific community, but a community like this, and she said in the Q&A she cares very deeply about these people, and she doesn't want them to be misunderstood or mocked. So it comes from a weird place of love, too. She's kind of documenting this near sacred tradition they have in their community that doesn't exist other places. But, you know, on that first hand, it's like a super toxic tradition. So she's kind of juggling both of those things, strikes a really neat ambivalence, and I thought it was good. Yeah.
It seems to have a kind of be in conversation with Monrovia, just in terms of like this is a tradition. This has kind of had this almost institution within the institution that you don't really want to give up, but at the same time, there's something like deeply toxic and wrong and just upsetting about it.
That's a good way of framing it. It is kind of like objective documentary making in a way. So that's Those Who Desire. I don't know when or if it will be available to people, but that is a thing that you can go Googling for later on in the year if you want to.
Just make sure to clear your history after you're looking for pigeon breeding.
Yes. The other movie I feel wildly unqualified to talk about, but it's The Grand Bazaar by Jody Mack, and that's Bazaar spelled Bizarre, not Bazaar, though that pun is definitely intended. Jody Mack is an avant-garde animator.
We talked about her briefly yesterday.
Yeah, we did. We talked about her animating like stop motion, like her going through a mineral collection in her short the other day. In the past, she's worked a lot with textiles and fabrics. Like one of my favorite shorts of hers is just she's taken a bunch of still photographs of different tie-dye shirts and she like plays them on 24 frames per second, like a stained brackage film or something, and they create this like really cool pattern. And then the movie that she's made that's probably closely related to this is Dusty Stacks of Mom, which Nathan's talked about on the podcast before.
Mhm.
That is an animated film about her mother's poster factory that was going out of business at the time she made it. And she made her own mock album of Dark Side of the Moon about her mom's poster factory, because Dark Side of the Moon is one of those iconic posters people buy when they're in college, right? This movie is also kind of like a musical anthology film, but the music is almost entirely instrumental. It has this very wonky experimental electronic vibe. I couldn't quite tell exactly how the music was being made. It seems like it was mostly through drum machines and samplers and sampling like real world things like bird calls and stuff and putting them on loops to make beats out of them. One of the late songs in the movie uses the Skype sound, the ba boo ba 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 boo, as like its main beat, and that is a really good song. I want this to be available as like an album eventually, like a soundtrack album. But what you're actually looking at, she's again working with textiles. She said that she made this movie while she was touring around showing other films. And because she's worked with textiles in the past, she usually gets invited to come see weavers and stuff like that. And so she's like using their rugs and their tapestries to create these animations. Like she'll take it's kind of hard to describe without looking at it, but essentially she's like stacking and unstacking rugs and fabrics in specific spaces. And because it's stop motion photography, you're also seeing the world around those fabrics change as well. And so she's creating these really overwhelming. And this is an hour-long movie, and you're like just looking at like fabrics like doing strange things and like having a life of their own without humans. She also animates a lot of other non-fabric objects. Like there's one scene where she animates turning pages of a book. Like she'd take a picture of this page and then turns the page, takes a picture of that page, and it looks like data is just like scrolling across the book because of the way the animation works. And one of the things that you start to see is like a through line as you're working your way through this hour-long film is that she is juxtaposing these fabrics with places in which cultural exchange happens. So she shoots stuff in airports. She shoots stuff on like shipping docks, and you see like time-lapse photography of like shipping containers get moved around. It looks like you're looking at a video game or something.
Yeah.
And then of course she has like things like the Skype sound embedded in the movie that seem to imply a sense of like communication and cultural exchange as well. And then you have these textiles and these patterns that we're familiar with because they have kind of been granted to us by other cultures. You know, we have rugs that look like they're from India or from Mexico or from Spain or wherever. And she said that early on she thought about making a cut of this movie where it showed you exactly like where you were on the globe and where all these things came from, but ultimately she wanted it to be like this blur, this mashup of all these different cultures together, like where you're not sure where anything came from anymore. Somebody asked her in the Q&A about like, you know, the privilege and exploitation of these fabrics. Like we only have them because of colonialism, right? And she said that like she thinks that cultural origin for things like this have become very vague and very confusing. For let's say you or your family's from Mexico, and there's like a pattern that you kind of identify as like, well, this is a Mexican pattern. And she said the only way to be Mexican, you must have been colonized by the Spanish, right? And so like there's this very abstract, like insidious, inescapable root of colonialism that is kind of like all tied up in the global mass market as well.
Yeah.
That like again, I'm kind of struggling to come up with words to explain it. This is like a galaxy brain movie. I feel like I need a PowerPoint presentation to run through all the beats of it. But ultimately, she is very concerned in the way that information and materials are kind of trading hands around the globe. There are also scenes where she's animating globes turning as well, and like multiple globes like crashing into each other and stuff like that. It is a wild, thought-provoking, energetic avant-garde feature that I think that people who don't usually like avant-garde might be able to get down with because of just how packed full of ideas it is, and how lively and exciting to look at and exciting to listen to it is. So I imagine this is a movie that might find its way onto like Fandor or Movie or something later on in the year, and I would encourage people to check it out.
I mean, we were sitting like 3 seats down from a movie person, so
That's right.
maybe they they were taking that in.
Mm.
Our next movie that we went and saw was the latest from Paul Greengrass. He's known for the Bourne trilogy, which the introduction guy really kind of like had this like passive aggressive like outside of the Bourne movies. I'm like, well, let's not discount the Bourne movies. They're good, and let's not.
You're right.
Like, come on, they're probably better than the rest of his.
Greengrass
They're probably
is
better
like-
than the rest of his stuff. I mean, but he also has done Captain Phillips, United '93. He did a number of political films before he kind of came to America and was doing films here. This one is called 22 July. It's going to be out on Netflix probably pretty soon, and it's looking at the events in Norway on is it Utuya?
Oh,
Utuya?
Oh, I have no idea.
the
Yeah,
island.
it's outside of
Yeah.
Oslo. But this happened. The events of this 22nd of July in 2011, where this right-wing terrorist came and bombed the prime minister's
Government building,
office.
yeah,
And then went to this island and killed 69 of the children who were there at the summer camp. And so this is like 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it's probably the first 20-ish, 30 minutes, kind of in that range, is the actual attack. You kind of kick off with that, and then the rest of the movie is the fallout with the survivors, kind of the political stuff. You have the lawyers involved, and just kind of the bureaucratic steps after this tragic event happens. I know, like we're all kind of mellow on it. I don't have a lot to say about it. I'm not a giant fan of it.
You had a lot to say about it yesterday, or one specific thing that you said very forcefully.
Well, the one thing I don't like is I don't want to watch kids being shot. So which I'm like, if all right, if that's the line I got to draw, that's fine. I can live with that drawing.
It
But
felt
also,
against your sensibilities as a journalist or something.
well, no, it just when you're thinking of like just kind of the journalistic intent, and Paul Greengrass is allegedly a former journalist.
I didn't actually know he was a former journalist.
He is, and he kind of is wanting to look at this with like a journalistic lens, and I think that if you're going to be doing that, what you want to do going in is not this is what happened. It's more what are the questions that you're asking with this event. It's not your job to just take it and just show it again like it's already happened.
That's Frederick Wiseman's job.
But
He's much better at it.
yeah, like what are the questions that you're asking? You're making as much as you want to fight it, you're making a narrative, movie that's not actual real events. You're taking the story and making it cinematic. And so, what are the things that you want to probe that are visual, that are cinematic, that you want to kind of get into? And I find that he does that a little bit, but not enough to like warrant being that interesting. I think he's just he's more content with going, I'm going to show you this event and how harrowing it was and the kind of fallout for it. And what did you guys think of it though?
The main thing about the fallout, which is the most of the movie, like Zach talked about watching children being shot. That happens in like the first third, and it's like
it's like the first 25 minutes, and then it's an hour and 30 minutes of the other stuff.
The other stuff, and problem with it is there's a lot of other stuff. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
in Paul Greengrass's introduction, he talked about being very interested in like far right ideology
Yeah.
and like very strongly identifying like why do these men, white supremacists, do what they do.
Yeah.
But
So he's not like trying to humanize them
No.
or understand them. He's trying to make you afraid of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
How insidious they are in trying like to game the system and the optics to their advantage.
Right. But and like that's probably pretty good. But then he also throws in just a ton of other stuff. Like issues surrounding does this guy have a right to public defense and a trial? There's some stuff about a commission to put together a report of like how did the government fail to prevent this? Some other thing like, and then when you're focusing on some of the survivors like getting over like just physical trauma and like going to physical therapy, like that's a lot. Like maybe pick a couple of those things.
And that's what Andrew and I talked about yesterday, is that there's all of these different things, so it's not like uninteresting, but they don't give enough time to each of these things that are much more interesting than him just kind of showing the thing, you know.
Right.
There is this like psychological impact on the survivors that I think would have been worth investigating. You know, you have this the brothers, and the one was shot and is having to rehab back to this level of just mobility, yeah. And you have him who survived, and the brother who got away, who is fine, but you can
mentally.
I felt like we should have like really kind of investigated him mentally, because he kind of has this almost survivor's guilt to it.
And
Because
he kind of disappears out of the movie after
he does,
his brother heals.
And I think that's where the story is. That's where he should have been. He has too many things that he's focused on at one time.
And it doesn't seem like he does. For me, at least, none of them were interesting. Like you said, they're all interesting ideas, but like the way they were on screen and just all together, I was like, it's so boring.
And I think it just goes down to I don't know if Paul Greengrass was the person to like tell the story. I don't know if this is a remake of a movie or there's just another movie, but there's another movie about these events that came out earlier this year.
It was from Norway.
Yeah.
But it has been notoriously hard to find if you weren't at the film's premiere. I mean, I really tried to find that movie for my video essay.
It's 22 July.
Or is it U:22 July?
Oh.
I think it's the latter, but one of those. I didn't have an ethical problem with the movie. I didn't think it was particularly exploitative of the issue or like sensationalistic in the violence or anything like that, especially considering I watched Vox Lux the day prior, which like takes the concept of somebody surviving a school shooting and like does no exploration of their trauma. But what I think the main thing that this comes down to is it is too long and it's too boring. Like he wants to tell all of the things.
Too many things on his mind.
Yeah, and it's a movie that primarily exists to like explain things. And if you're doing that, you should do it in a focused, concise, clear way. And I tweeted this already, but I think it was Stephen Colbert maybe talked about Rachel Maddow's style of news journalism, and he said that the way that she explains a story is like she is laying out a car piece by piece on a lawn, like every individual piece of hardware, and explaining it before you talk about the actual car.
Sure.
And I think it works for Rachel Maddow. I don't think it works for Paul Greengrass. I think he's doing the same thing here, trying to methodically go through every single step of the legal process and everything the families are going through, and it just becomes really messy and unfocused. And again, 2.5 hours.
He lays the pieces out, and then you're like, all right, well, let's tie this all together. He's like, oh no, it's over now. I just wanted to lay all these pieces out, and then we'll leave. But yeah,
I think that there are some interesting kind of subversive things to the way it challenges to think about shootings. Because one of the major plot points of the film is whether or not the shooter is going to take an insanity plea in court. And when shootings like this happen, and they have often in the last couple of years, the news always frames it as a mental health story. And that is something that conservatives and liberals tend to be able to rally behind. They're like, they both agree that we need more mental health coverage in this country, or that we need to talk about it as a mental health issue. but only liberals
Want to pay for it.
want to pay for mental health. The problem is, it's not actually a mental health issue.
Yeah.
Most of the people who do these shootings are not mentally unstable or unwell in any way. Most of them are ideologically driven. And this movie really hammers that home, that there was a purpose, there was a political message that was being sent by this shooting. I mean, go back to the news coverage of Dylan Roof. Dude literally wanted to start a race war. Most of the news coverage about that was about mental health. And Paul Greengrass insists that, like, no, we're not going to talk about mental health. We're not even going to talk about banning weapons, because what's the dangerous root here is the ideology, the white supremacist ideology that allows people to think that, you know, all other lives are expendable for this greater cause. But it's long and boring. So.
Yeah. It's one of the.
There's just one thing to me, like we talk about. They debate a bit about using the insanity plea for the killer, whose name I forgot. Sorry.
Who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah, he's a piece of shit, so that's fine.
And then quickly dismiss it so that he wants to dismiss so that he can stand up and like spew some propaganda.
Right.
And it's like the white nationalist ideology is not on trial. That's not what's happening. But in my head, I'm like, that is a form of insanity. But like, it doesn't make that explicit. But like, that sort of racism and bigotry is not actually based in rational thinking. But
or at least not like evidence-based rational thinking. Like, there is a sick logic to it, and the people who subscribe to this worldview will like pride themselves on their logic, and how everybody else is just like going on feelings.
But at the root of it is something fundamentally illogical,
erroneous science and stuff like that.
But like, it doesn't go there. But it got me thinking about it, and I was like, well, I guess you could go with insanity, but like not anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Well, 22 July, like I said, it'll be on Netflix at some point soon. So if you would, you know, it's in terms of like the filmmaking, it's a Paul Greengrass movie. You're gonna get that shaky cam,
unnecessary. Like, he's not even shooting action sequences.
No.
He's just using shaky cam to show shot reverse shot conversations, and it's always kind of like floating up and down, like the cameraman's drunk or something.
It's he just, I don't know. That's a whole other discussion. But I want to move on because we have a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
Lydia, you had a movie that you caught right after that movie.
Yeah, I had to run from 22 July to another theater to catch Firecrackers by Jasmine Mozafari. Sorry if I've mispronounced it. I was interested. This TIFF is the only TIFF I've been to, but I was interested to catch as many films as I could by female filmmakers. This one, I described it to Andrew Zach as like friendships, but sad. It's about two girls. They live in a small town, and they just want to get out. They've been saving money like for a year, doing shitty part-time job like toilet scrubbing, I think. And they're like, we're gonna go to New York City and just like escape and like go live somewhere that's not constraining to us. There's Lou, who's a redhead, and Chantel, who's either a mixed girl or whatever. So they don't fit in, because it seems like most of the other town residents are white. Lou may or may not be a lesbian or bisexual, because she beats the shit out of a girl for, like, talking to her in a derogatory way. Or, like, trying to gay bash her in the very beginning. It's like, well, you can't really behave this way. Like, you're going to get in trouble for defending yourself or fighting, even if you feel justified, like someone picked a fight with you for a part of your identity. But they're having a lot of trouble. They were gonna like leave town with a teenage boy, and then he flakes when like his friends are like, they're not gonna fuck you. They're like, so he's like, well, I guess I'm not gonna help you. And then Chantel keeps like talking to her ex-boyfriend, who's very obviously abusive. Not on screen, but like she's kind of afraid of him, or like he isn't controlling the text, or like gaslights her. And Lou spends most of the movies on Lou, and like how she's trying to like convince Chantel to leave, or just things spiral out of control quickly. She doesn't get along with her mom. Her little brother like steals her makeup and clothes, and like she wants to like protect him because he's a young kid, may or may not be gay, or maybe gender identity is fluid. It's not explicitly made clear, but the mom screams slurs at him when she catches him with makeup on. So there's like a lot of good reasons for wanting to leave. And I think mostly what this movie explored is just like, I feel for Lou. She's so punchy and like mad as hell. And like even one of the characters like, why are you mad all the time? Like, one of the shitty dudes like, why can't you be chill? Like, be a cool girl. They're like, this cool girl thing keeps coming up for me, it seems, in all these movies. And Lou is not. She cannot learn how. And Chantel does a little bit. She tries to convince these two older guys to give them a ride out of town, but it's like, they're gonna. One of them like drops the word jailbait, and then they don't care, and it's like, okay, like this is a dangerous, scary situation.
Right.
And Lou like desperately is like, don't do it. I don't want to like play ball with these dudes. I don't want to pretend. I don't want to like make out for their pleasure. I don't want to like exchange any favor. Like she can't like fit into this mode of being pleasing to other people to get what she wants. Like she doesn't want to do that. And it's like, God damn it.
When you were describing the other day, for a minute it seemed like it was kind of along the same lines as Tangerine from a couple of years ago, but you said it's going a different direction, right?
Yeah, because Tangerine, the two characters, not necessarily stuck a little bit, but kind of, they would like to move upwards in LA, but like not just flee.
Yeah.
And this is, these two girls do not want to stay where they are, and it gets increasingly harder and harder to stay where they are. But they are also like very limited options for getting out of town.
Right.
It maybe ends on a hopeful note. I don't know. I worry about young people who are like, I'm gonna run away to New York City because like that shit's expensive.
Wendy and Lucy, right?
Right. I was like, what are you gonna do when you get there?
Yeah, she has the right idea. She's like, I'm going to Alaska.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that is a different thing of going to like LA or New York.
No, she's like Alaska.
But you know, they want to live their lives without being like told what to do or patronized.
Yeah.
Obviously, so.
Cool.
I don't know. Maybe it'll go to Netflix, and like that's where you don't have to watch it in a big theater.
Yeah. You liked it though?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
It's just sad.
While you were watching Friendship But Sad, Zach and I were back in the avant-garde world for Wavelengths number 2. This one was called
Another brick in the wall.
Another Brick in the Wall.
There were bricks in walls.
So Zach, this is your like second ever avant-garde program. What were your thoughts on this one?
I mean, if it wasn't my second ever, I've seen the movie. I've seen the movie.
Seen Dog Star Man and stuff like that.
No, I mean I've seen the movie Chappie in theaters, so I've seen avant-garde cinema. I don't know what you.
I had a That's Chappie moment in one of these shorts when they played the opening credits of Days of Being Wild by Wong Kar-wai, and I was like, that's Days of Being Wild.
But no, there wasn't too much I had to say about it overall. I didn't like this, or I mean, I didn't dislike it, but I liked the series yesterday more than this, or the day before than this one.
Yeah.
The two standouts for me I really liked was Trees Down Here, even though it had this snake that was in a tree that was a little too much.
Well, before we get into the weeds of like each of these individual shorts, we should talk a little bit about what ties them all together, what they have in common.
Well, I think that's kind of what struck me about Trees Down Here, because it's you have this like this footage that Ben Rivers, the director, is shooting at Churchill College on the University of Cambridge, and you have mainly my takeaway from it is you have these structures that are in the middle of the like nature and trees and woods, and it's this, you have these structures that kind of impede and appear within the natural world and kind of intrude on it to an extent. You have these he has these shots at one point where he's talking to this professor about about reading like the age line on a tree, and I really liked that you have like this. You can kind of see like it goes on and on and on, but there are these lines that kind of look like trees that are kind of again interfering with the open space that you're kind of looking at, and that seems to be the context for the entire film of like you have this vast range of space, but there are these structures and these things that are impeding on that just kind of have this place within them. But then you have these very strange structures, but then you have the natural world kind of melding in with it. You have like the owl that's appearing throughout the film.
Right.
You have the snake that's slithering all over the place, even though one of the later shots where it's slithering around shoes is a little bit too much for me. But it's just I really enjoyed that one. I thought that one really kind of hit the point that it seemed like the whole series itself was covering. I don't know. Did you see that?
Yeah, I like Trees Down Here a lot too. The through line here from the name of this program is all about walls and spaces, like you were talking about, individual components that make larger spaces, like bricks, for example. The first movie, Ada Kayla, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, opens on a wall that is painted blue but has been chipped away in some parts, and you can kind of see brown underneath, and we're so close up that these splotches of brown look like we're looking at a map, and these are continents or something like that, and you're kind of going across this wall as if it is the entire world. And then you have this final film that we saw, Walled, Unwalled. It was almost like a documentary of somebody explaining all of these stories about various interesting walls.
I mean, it was pretty much documentary. He does like interview people and does his own like research
like archival audio and stuff like that. That short I definitely want to flag up. It was filmed in a place called the Funk House, which is a German propaganda studio where they made radio, or they were sending out radio signals of propaganda during the Cold War. And the creator of this short, his name is
Lawrence Abu Hamdan.
Yeah. He is going back and forth between all the rooms of this studio space. There's like these 3 rooms that are all connected by windows, or their windows are kind of all facing each other.
Yeah.
And
but it's also very like modern because and he talks about you can shape the texture of the sounds because there's things within the booths that you can move around.
Yeah,
and he's playing.
The walls are movable.
And he's playing with just with just sound while he's in there.
Because all the rooms are soundproof, and so if he opens a door, you can hear something in the other room. Like there's a drummer drumming for part of the short in another room, but then he closes it, and you still see the drummer, but you hear absolutely nothing. It's kind of surreal to like think about that soundproofing technology. But the stories that he's just telling are fascinating. The first one is kind of funny. It is about somebody who got arrested for selling marijuana because the smell of their marijuana was coming through the walls, and police raided the house because they felt like they had what's the word I'm looking for?
Enough cause.
Probable cause.
Yeah.
But the question that the story explores is that smell in public space or private space? Because it's coming through the wall. The drugs are inside the wall, but the smell is outside the wall. So is he infringing upon public space or not? And then there are also some really harrowing stories near the end of the short about this like boutique prison in Syria that's like just made in 2016 or something like that, where the walls have been designed specifically to carry noise so that when prisoners are being tortured, it echoes throughout the entire building. Somebody can be tortured in the basement of the building, and somebody in the top floor of the building will still be able to hear that as if it's happening right next to them.
And they're also disoriented because the prisoners are brought in blindfolded, and the only
Right.
people who know
They have no sense of space.
they have no sense of space. The only people who know kind of like anything about the logistics of it are the people who are like working there, because all the prisoners, they're brought in blindfolded. All they know of this space is the four walls around them.
Right.
And so that's what also creates just the tension of the whole room.
So that was a fascinating short, not only because the stories themselves were very interesting, but the way it was shot was interesting. There was a lot of reflections off of the glass panes. They were projecting words, like transcripts of the audio that they were recording, through the glass panes. You kind of see it reflecting off of people's faces and stuff like that. The one last short that I want to talk about is called 1986 Summer. And it is a lost film that has been rediscovered and released by Toshio Matsumoto. He was an avant-garde filmmaker in the 70s and the 80s. He has a feature called Funeral Parade of Roses, which apparently was an inspiration for Clockwork Orange. But some of his big shorts include Mona Lisa, Atman, Demons. And his short, 1986 Summer, is doing something similar to what we saw in the Wavelengths programs from the day previously, where it's doing a lot of superimposition and double exposure. It's a little less disorienting than the ones that we saw the other day, because I always felt like I understood what I was looking at for the most part. On one level of transparency, you have shots of trees, or I guess leaves. You're kind of like under a tree looking up into
Yeah, it's
leaves.
more like the branches.
Yeah. And it's just like this green texture that kind of overlays the entire screen. And then on the other level of transparency, you're seeing this building, kind of like what we were talking about with trees down here. It's like a college campus or something. And he keeps zooming out from the building. So it's a close-up, and then it's a wide shot, and then it loops, and it's back again. And it feels like you're constantly like being pulled away from it. Like you're watching a really strange 3D movie that's trying to disorient your sense of space. Something he does in his movie Atman as well, which is like 12 minutes of like zooming in and circling a particular figure, and you feel like you're ready for liftoff by the end of the short. But I thought that short, 1986 Summer, did a really great job at something that a lot of the other shorts didn't, which was just like conveying a specific sensation.
Yeah.
I think I like avant-garde shorts the most when they're focused on just like communicating a feeling or communicating like an aesthetic experience, like one singular one, and that you can have for the full duration of the film. And a lot of the ones that we were watching yesterday were kind of cobbled together of different components, and they felt a little fragmented. And I imagine that that's the point in many of them, but the series as a whole, the program as a whole, felt a little fragmented to me as well. There is this through line of walls, but as a whole, I didn't feel like they complemented each other or played off each other quite as well as the ones the other day did.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were very heady and not sensory in the way that Matsumoto's 1986 Summer was. I was a really big fan of that.
No, I can agree with that. All right, well let's wrap up with the big movie. We went to Midnight Madness last night. We saw the new Halloween.
We did.
Real quickly, it's directed by David Gordon Green. It's written by Jeff Bradley, as well as Danny McBride and David Gordon Green. You can definitely feel some Danny McBride that they lighten it up in a couple moments.
It's a funnier movie than you'd expect.
Yeah.
And it's a better structured funny than like The Predator. It's much more. They weave it in a lot more organically. But this one picks up 40 years after the original. They pretty much go screw it to all the other sequels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is literally a response to the 1978 first movie, and so it's catching Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis's character. She's literally been living these 40 years, just reliving kind of those moments and preparing herself to once again go up against Michael Myers. Naturally, Michael Myers is in a mental institution and is being moved. I think you can figure out what happens when he is moved.
He escapes from the bus.
It's not a spoiler
Yeah,
to lay that out. And so The interesting thing is you have these three generation of Strode women. You have Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode, but then you also have her daughter played by Judy Greer, and then you have her daughter played by Virginia Gardner. So you have these three generations who the younger two generations have been growing up with these stories, but don't really have a tangible visual way of it just kind of has this mythic quality to it, and they just look at Jamie Lee Curtis's character as being insane.
Yeah, Judy Greer's the first Jamie Lee's daughter character talks about like you ruined my childhood because while Laurie Strode was preparing to meet Michael again, she's like training her daughter how to use guns and like instilling or trying to instill this like sense of paranoia, and
the whole house is like booby trapped with dozens of security measures.
Yeah.
And so like for Judy Greer's character, she does not have the trauma of Michael Myers, but she has secondhand trauma of
his
like
anxiety.
Yes, like her childhood was not stable.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I think that's as far as you need on the plot. I mean, Michael, he comes out and he does Michael Myers stuff. As fans, all fans of the original Halloween, and since this is like a direct, we can skip thinking anything about these sequels. It doesn't really matter. What did you think? What did you make of this movie? Because it was one of the things that it kind of was marketed as right when it was announced was that John Carpenter approves of this.
He's a producer. He made the score.
He was a producer. Yeah, he was very involved in this. So it wasn't like the Rob Zombie ones or anything.
It wasn't like Halloween 2,
which I know that
which he wrote, but
a lot of folks like the Carpenter one, or not the Carpenter ones, the Rob Zombie ones, and are probably going to be fatigued by the discourse around this movie, like pitting it against the Rob Zombie.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, what did you think of Halloween 2018?
You loved the original. It's like one of your favorite movies ever, right?
Yeah.
So what was your response?
I don't know. I have a hard time parsing my response to the movie and the response to watching it with the Midnight Madness crowd.
Mm-hmm.
The new Halloween, it's very clever, is what I said in my tweet, and it has these moments that are very clearly designed to elicit some sort of crowd reaction. There's even space in the movie for
laughs of recognition. I understood that reference.
Yeah, laughs of recognition, or cheering a particularly good kill.
Yeah.
We had an audience that cheered for the kills, very stereotypical.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced that before. I don't know if I like it.
It was very weird because he's murdering just random people before he gets to the Strode family, and he's just grabbing different weapons and they're just oh yeah.
Oh shit.
Well, he's murdering people.
Right.
So I don't know how I feel about that or what it's doing.
It's like Carol Clover's book Made Flesh,
yes.
Men, Women, and Chainsaws. She talks a lot about the allegiance of the audience in horror films, and how, especially because of the way the camera often frames it, you're looking through the killer's eyes.
Which we don't explicitly do here.
No, which is an interesting...
It calls it back, the original. You actually get the shot of Michael Myers, 6-year-old Michael Myers, killing his sister from the original. They insert
but
that.
There's no new footage like that.
No.
But still, the same rule applies. Clover says that because we're often looking through the killer's eyes, audiences kind of have this instinctual urge to root for the killer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just because that's what's moving the story forward, but they're cheering for the kills, but then they also cheer for the reversal against the killer at the end of the movie, and we just saw that come alive in a really big way.
I think that this is also a big example because it's Michael Myers. It's very it's not some random horror movie.
Some dude
Michael
dressed
Myers.
as Michael Myers came out on stage right before the movie started.
And
everybody's cheering for him.
It's the same thing if you saw Jason in a Friday the 13th movie. It's just he's such an iconic figure.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of plays into it. So that's why I gave it a little bit of leeway.
I don't know if I liked that it leaned into Michael Myers, the shape being supernatural.
It's nice
it's
how
very
subtle
ambiguous in the first one. He just disappears at the end.
And he's not called the Shape until the credits.
Yes. And then this time, he definitely takes some life-threatening injuries and just keeps going. And that's scary, but I don't know. I think what scared me about the Shape was
not knowing.
Not knowing, like it just
Yeah.
could just be a real strong dude.
But you can't go back to not
No,
knowing.
that's
you
true.
can't make a new movie about Michael Myers.
So I guess they're gonna lean
Well, I mean,
into that.
I mean, that's kind of I feel like the point of the whole movie. Is
Yeah.
You can't go back to not knowing. That was one of the things I really enjoyed the movie, but they kind of tried to frame it very much like hitting the same beats of the original. And I think that you could do that to an extent, but the real story in this is the 3 generations of women and kind of how Laurie's trauma from that night has not only changed and affected her, but also affected her daughter and her daughters to her daughter. You know, it's that you have these 3 women who are all affected by this figure,
Mhm.
and I don't know. I think it should have just been this focused, the victim and her abuser kind of thing. And it kind of tries to go into these all different directions. It has the storyline with these people who are doing a podcast on the Michael Myers case. It has these. It takes Judy Greer's character's daughter and is like kind of gives her like a team of teens, but you don't really get to know them long enough to really have any effect whenever they're dealing with Michael Myers. You know, when you have the teens in like the original, like you at least
like
have a step.
TJ Souls,
there's
they're really
good-
funny teens in the original. Yeah.
There's good like acting character work in this though. With
They are
There's
good.
a little
like,
kid.
Well, they are
That
good.
kid.
The drug dealer kid from Blockers is also like a druggie in this movie, and
Mhm.
he's just really good at communicating
No, they do a good job.
that with
Yeah.
not a whole lot on the page.
Yeah, no, they do a good job because it's just there's not much time to really give them too much introduction. So they're introduced and then they jump into the fray.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're dead teenagers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's just like I don't know. I think it could have been like a really strong offering if it kind of
If it
focused
was a little tighter, which
Yeah.
is what I love about the original.
Yeah, if it just really kind of focused, and it's not like this is like over long. It's only an hour and 45 minutes. So it's like 10 or 15 minutes longer than the original. But I don't know. I still like it though. I think it does a really good job of merging like modern horror filmmaking sensibilities with the elements that were effective in the original. It doesn't really have the understanding of space in one area as well. It's moving to too many places, and by the time we get to Laurie's, fortress,
that is the best part.
yeah,
That is the best part,
it's the best part of the movie. We got a decent amount of established space, but at the same time, it's like we're introduced to Laurie, and then we kind of ditch her for a
Like,
while
we go
for
to
this
Judy
teenager
Greer's
thing,
house
exactly.
and like the high school.
And so, yeah, I just, I felt like if we could have got really attention on one specific story, it really would have been something special. But at the same time, it's still, I think a very strong offering and much better than, especially it seems like some of the others were received.
Yeah, and I think that as a modern mainstream horror movie, it's doing a very different thing than what audiences are used to. I mean, it's just so physical, so tangible. I know we have the Shape as kind of a supernatural being who can't die, but still, he's somebody who has to kill people by like stomping on their heads and hitting them with sledgehammers and stuff like that. Very different from the supernatural,
like
intangible stuff that we're seeing, like in It, for example.
And David Gordon Green clearly understands that because the way he shoots a lot of the kills once Michael Myers is out on the loose is like, for instance, there's one where the woman is like you're watching through the window, she's doing stuff, and you can and David Gordon Green does a great job because you'll see Michael Myers in the periphery, which is kind of a callback to how Carpenter shot it. And so he kind of plays with that, even though he is this supernatural being. There is this tangibleness that he goes about whenever he's having to perform the kills. It's not like he's just appearing in going through walls or anything.
And to contrast it with Predator, the kills are like equally gory, but they don't feel CG. I mean, there might be a little bit.
He's gonna like lean into the bloodiness of it. Like they're just like
they're quick and violent, and like that's what's scary about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then like Predator, it's like all these CG intestines and like.
And sometimes he'll take it off screen, and so it kind of creates an impact because it's not all on screen. Some of them are on screen, but some of them he'll take to the side.
It's about the unstoppability of Myers as opposed to exactly how violent the kills themselves are. Yeah. So in a way, I admire the kind of old school horror sensibility of this film. I think that it'll be something new for like young audiences who have not seen a lot of older horror movies and are kind of used to a different approach. But on the other hand, like it feels to me not only like a sequel to Halloween, it feels like a sequel to Scream as well. It's a movie that can only exist in a world where Halloween also exists, and we can kind of refer back to it and wink at the audience a little bit. And so you have a couple different styles interweaving here. You have the slasher stuff with with Michael Myers and a new set of teenagers. You kind of have a rape revenge story with Laurie and all of her guns that she's stockpiling to kill. But then you also have the maybe Danny McBride contributed comedy element to this movie, which is a really big part of how this whole thing is put together. And
it's something that kind of permeates through the whole, it never is there and then the sideline. I mean, there's this one kid character who he's just like, nope. And Michael Myers stuff is happening, and it's not like
this kid's horror savvy.
And he's just like, no, I'm
if
out.
You go up there, you're dead.
He's very aware.
So very knowing, very aware for sure.
And like I said, it's a lot better than Predator. It's not there to just be kind of obnoxious and in your face winking. It's just it's very sly, kind of. It's built more on the characters.
It definitely loves Halloween. It loves Halloween. It loves horror films.
But it's the cheekiness, the cleverness really gets in its way on a structural standpoint. That's where the movie doesn't feel super tight.
Without an audience, I don't know how I'm going to react to it.
Exactly. There's something else I was going to say. I've lost it. Do you guys have other thoughts about Halloween?
No, I think like I said before, I think people will dig it, and I hope that it kind of, like you said, it has these kind of old horror sensibilities, but also more new horror sensibilities. So I think it'll be okay. So I hope it'll be an introduction for some to go check out some of the other ones.
So even though it is kind of loose and rambly in terms of the jokiness of the screenplay, it is a really handsomely lit movie, and it looks very nice, which is something that I think a lot of mainstream horror filmmakers have gone away from since the days of John Carpenter. David Gordon Green goes a long way in utilizing the effects of the lights of police sirens and the lights of headlights and the lights of flashlights,
torches.
Yeah, to kind of cut through fog and create these really nice misty spaces that feel very haunting and also very nice to look at on a visual pleasure level. But I definitely felt like I was watching two different movies. I was watching the jokey version, and I was watching the traditional version, which is why I think it's kind of like a reference back to Scream, where they're kind of poking fun at the conventions
but
and
also
doing the
horror.
conventions at the exact same time. I think that it gets a lot better in the third act than it was
when it drops. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes into some new territory after it's kind of covered all the traditional stuff.
Once it loses all that stuff, it's great.
It gets really interesting, and it starts to play with that family dynamic you were talking about of the three generations of Strodes kind of all affected by this trauma. But it comes a little too late, and they're not able to truly develop it in a way that it deserves.
Yeah.
And it ultimately felt a little lackluster at the end of the day because it feels a little compromised by having to be kind of this cheeky callback.
I'm going to watch the original Halloween again, and, probably several times in my life. I don't know how often I'm going to come back to 2018 Halloween.
Right. I will say that this doesn't really have anything to do with the movie's quality.
Yeah.
But it just 100% confirms a bunch of shit in my video essay about guns in horror films, because there are so many guns.
Oh my god!
In Halloween, maybe more guns than I've ever seen in a horror movie, and they're all
Lori came prepared.
Yeah, they are all used precisely to the rules of the video essay. So maybe watch that again, or watch that for the first time before you go watch Halloween 2018. Shameless plug.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna finish up. What we got? We each got one thing at least we're gonna check out today. So, but we'll be back. Maybe Tuesday or Wednesday or something. We can do a quick diary just to kind of run down some of the stuff I've seen today and Monday. But
what are y'all seeing today?
I've got Asghar Farhadi's Everybody Knows.
Um,
Everyone knows.
Everybody knows.
Everybody.
I have Errol Morris's American Dharma, his Steve Bannon documentary.
Yeah, and then I have is it Li Changdong's
Li Changdong's
Burning, which I've heard fantastic stuff
And
Same.
for a long time.
or no, that's some
That's
other
it.
day.
Yeah, that's it. We all have one movie today.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, guys, thanks for listening. We will see you later this week.
Bye.